All right, so we're diving deep today into vulnerability.
Oh, yeah, we are.
And we've got, like, the ultimate guidebook for this one, Brené Brown's Daring Greatly.
You asked for it, you got it.
Yeah, buckle up, because this one is going to, like, seriously shift your perspective.
Yeah, it's not just about, feeling your feelings.
Right.
This book goes deep into how vulnerability is actually the root of courage. Connection, the whole shebang, the wholehearted life.
Yeah, and the funny thing is Brené Brown, the vulnerability expert.
Right, the researcher.
Yeah, she actually started out hating vulnerability.
Yes, she did.
Like, who doesn't, right?
But seriously.
It's scary. It's messy.
It is.
But that's what makes her journey in this book so relatable.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
she goes from vulnerability hater to vulnerability guru.
That's right.
And she kind of shows us how vulnerability can actually be transformative.
Absolutely. And it's not about, like, oversharing or anything.
Right.
It's more about recognizing those moments when you're shutting down or avoiding risk. Trying to, like, present this perfect image,
Yeah, totally.
Her research shows that those are all actually ways we try to protect ourselves from vulnerability,
Oh, interesting.
but they end up holding us back.
So how does Brown define vulnerability? Like, what does it actually look like?
Well, she says it's uncertainty risk and emotional exposure.
Okay.
And the thing is, we don't choose whether or not we experience those things.
Right.
It's just how we respond to them.
Think about it. Life is full of uncertainty.
Yes, I am.
We take risks all the time.
Whether we realize it or not. Yeah.
Putting ourselves out there,
Yeah.
expressing our feelings like it's all vulnerability.
It is. And Brown is really honest about her own struggles with this.
Oh, yeah.
She talks about how she used to, like, clean the house, eat peanut butter,
Oh, wow.
even blame other people just to avoid facing difficult emotions.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, me too.
She even told her therapist, I freaking hate vulnerability.
And her therapist responded by calling it an exquisite emotion.
Ooh, what a contrast.
Right. It's like she sees this beauty and power in what Brown initially perceived as weakness.
That's so interesting because it highlights how vulnerability can be scary and uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but also the path to something deeper and more meaningful.
Exactly.
But why are we so afraid of it in the first place?
Well, Brown argues that we live in this culture of never enough. We're bombarded with messages telling us to be more, do more, have more.
Yeah, constantly.
Right. And this creates a sense of scarcity, which makes us feel inadequate and afraid of being judged.
It's like everyone's worried about not measuring up,
Yeah,
and that fear fuels so much negativity.
absolutely. And Brown brings up a really interesting point about how society overuses the term narcissist.
Oh, yeah.
It's not always about arrogance.
Right.
Sometimes those behaviors come from this deep sense of shame
Oh, wow.
and a need to feel worthy.
So it's another example of how we misinterpret vulnerability as weakness,
Exactly.
instead of addressing that underlying fear of not being enough. We shame people for trying to feel validated.
Yeah. But the truth is, we all crave that sense of belonging and worthiness.
Makes sense.
It's a basic human need.
So how do we break free from this fear and actually start embracing vulnerability?
Well, Brown debunks a few major myths that keep us trapped.
Okay, let's hear them.
One of the biggest ones is that vulnerability equals weakness.
Yeah, we're taught to believe showing emotion is weak.
Right. But Brown flips that on its head, showing that vulnerability is actually the source of courage.
Interesting.
Think about her TED Talk.
Oh, yeah.
The one that went viral made her a household name.
Right.
She was terrified to give that talk.
I bet.
She felt so exposed. But instead of being seen as weak,
Yeah.
her vulnerability resonated with millions of people.
Wow.
It created this powerful connection that wouldn't have been possible if she had tried to hide her true feelings.
That's such a great example.
Yeah, it shows how being vulnerable can help us connect with others more authentically.
Totally. But then there's the myth that vulnerability is the same as oversharing.
Oh, yeah.
People think it means spilling your guts to anyone who will listen.
Right.
But Brown's really clear about boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not about dumping all your baggage on someone you just met.
Yeah.
It's about building trust and sharing with people who have earned the right to hear your story.
I love the analogy she uses of a marble jar.
Oh, yeah.
Like, imagine trust is a jar you fill with marbles.
Uh-huh.
Every time we show up for someone we're honest and authentic,
Yep.
we add a marble to the jar.
Right.
Small, consistent acts of vulnerability build strong trust.
It's like John Gottman's research on relationships.
Oh, yeah.
He found that trust is built through those moments of emotional attunement.
Oh, interesting.
Like noticing when your partner is feeling down and choosing to connect with them instead of withdrawing.
Wow. So those small moments really add up.
They do. They create that sense of security and closeness.
And there's one more myth Brown tackles.
Okay.
I don't do vulnerability myth. She argues we all experience vulnerability, whether we admit it or not.
We might try to deny it or suppress it, but it's always there shaping our lives.
So even by denying vulnerability, we're making a choice.
Exactly. And it often leads to more pain and disconnection in the long run.
So if we can't avoid vulnerability, how do we manage those uncomfortable feelings?
Well, that's where our defenses come in.
Okay.
Brown calls them the armory.
The armory.
Yeah, the ways we protect ourselves from that discomfort of being vulnerable.
So we all have these defenses.
We do, and they're not inherently bad.
Okay.
They're our way of coping with those tough emotions and protecting ourselves from getting hurt.
Right.
But if we rely on them too much,
Yeah.
they can actually prevent us from real connection and living a wholehearted life.
So what are some of these major defenses?
Well, Brown outlines three main ones.
Okay.
Foreboding joy,
Foreboding joy.
perfectionism, and numbing.
Okay, so let's break those down.
Sounds good.
Let's start with foreboding joy.
Right.
What is that exactly?
It's that feeling when something amazing happens, but instead of just enjoying it,
Yeah.
you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right? You're like bracing yourself for disaster.
Totally. Okay.
Like things can't be this good. Something bad has to happen.
Yeah.
It's a way to protect ourselves from disappointment,
Right.
but it also stops us from fully experiencing the joy.
So how do we combat foreboding joy?
Brown suggests gratitude as the antidote.
Gratitude.
Yeah. She even uses this phrase, vulnerability. Vulnerability, I'm grateful for.
I like that.
Right? It's about acknowledging the vulnerability you feel in those joyful moments
Okay.
and then shifting your focus to what you're grateful for.
So it's like saying, hey, I know this happiness might not last,
Yeah.
but I'm going to appreciate it anyway.
Exactly.
I'm grateful for this moment.
She gives a great example of when her husband suggested taking their kids on a trip without her.
Oh, wow.
Her first instinct was to panic,
I can imagine.
right out of fear.
Oh.
But she used her gratitude mantra to reframe the situation and focus on the positive, like her kids having a great time,
Okay.
her getting some much-needed rest, and that she trusted her husband.
So choosing gratitude over fear.
Exactly. Recognizing the vulnerability, but not letting it control you.
Makes sense.
Right.
Okay, what about perfectionism?
All right. Perfectionism is that belief that if we look to do everything perfectly,
Yeah.
we could avoid shame and blame.
But it's a trap, right?
It is, we end up chasing this impossible ideal, and when we inevitably fall short, we beat ourselves up.
Oh, yeah. Been there.
It's exhausting and self-defeating. I
Totally.
think it'll protect us from judgment,
Right.
but it actually sets us up for more shame.
Interesting.
Brown shares this really insightful perspective from the musician Nick Cave.
Oh, cool.
He talks about how true art embraces imperfection. He compares it to the human experience, saying, our imperfections are what make us unique and beautiful.
I love that.
It's like those cracks in a Japanese teacup.
Yeah.
They're not flaws. They're part of what makes it special.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
It reminds us that we're not supposed to be perfect.
Exactly.
Our imperfections make us human and relatable.
It's about accepting the messy reality of life
Right.
and letting go of that unattainable ideal of perfection.
And then there's numbing.
Yes. Numbing is when we use substances or behaviors to avoid those tough emotions.
Like what?
Think about it: scrolling through social media, overworking, binge-watching TV, even overeating.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that helps us avoid sitting with uncomfortable feelings.
It's like we're trying to numb the pain of feeling unworthy or anxious.
Exactly. And Brown is super open about her own struggles with drinking and smoking.
Really?
Yeah, as a way to numb those vulnerable feelings.
It's a reminder that numbing isn't about weakness,
No, it's about coping.
right? We all have our ways of dealing with discomfort.
And some are healthier than others.
Of course, the key is to recognize those numbing behaviors and find healthier ways to cope.
Right. Instead of escaping the discomfort, we can learn to sit with it, process it, and work through it.
That's where the real growth happens.
Absolutely.
So we've covered the big three defenses,
We have.
but Brown also dives into some less common ones.
Oh, yeah.
Viking or victim floodlighting and serpentining.
They sound a bit dramatic,
They do.
but they're so insightful.
Okay, let's hear about them.
All right, Viking or victim is this belief that you have to either dominate or be dominated.
So there's no in-between.
Right. You're either in control wielding power or you're a victim.
Wow.
Brown tells this really poignant story about a 6'4" man crouching in an imaginary box
Oh, wow.
to illustrate how trapped he felt in this mindset.
He must have felt so powerless.
Yeah, and Brown says the way out is to redefine success
Redefine success. How?
by asking ourselves how we're defining it.
Okay.
Is it about power and control, or is it about something deeper,
Deeper, like what?
like building meaningful relationships, pursuing our passions, or making a positive impact?
I like that.
Right.
Okay, what about floodlighting?
Floodlighting is when we overshare our vulnerabilities with people who haven't earned our trust.
Oh, yeah, I've totally done that.
Yeah, me too. We've all been there. You meet someone new,
Uh-huh.
and suddenly you're pouring your heart out.
Hoping to fast forward the relationship.
Right. But it often backfires.
It does, because vulnerability without boundaries leads to disconnection.
Exactly.
It's like trying to force intimacy before there's trust.
And trust takes time and effort.
It does. It's built through those small acts of connection like we talked about with the marble jar.
Exactly. And Brown admits she struggles with this too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she shares a lot publicly, but emphasizes the importance of working through those vulnerabilities with loved ones first.
Makes sense.
It's about being mindful of what, why, and how we share.
So there's a difference between being vulnerable and being reckless.
Exactly.
Okay, and then there's serpentining.
All right. Picture Peter Falk and the in-laws running around yelling serpentine.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie.
It's a classic, right?
Yeah.
Well, serpentining is about trying to control and avoid difficult situations.
By dodging and weaving around them.
Right, like you're trying to outrun vulnerability, but it's always right there.
I am so guilty of serpentining.
I think we all are.
If I have a tough conversation coming up, I overthink it.
Yeah.
Try to script it out, find a million other things to do.
Anything to avoid the discomfort.
Exactly.
But as Brown points out, it's exhausting and pointless.
It is.
We spend so much energy trying to avoid vulnerability when it's easier to just face it.
So true.
And the irony is, the more we try to control and avoid it,
Yeah.
the more it controls us.
So how do we deal with all these defenses?
Oh, that's where shame resilience comes in.
Shame resilience.
Yeah, it's about learning to recognize shame, understand its triggers, and cope with it in a healthy way.
Because shame is at the root of a lot of our defenses, right?
It is. It's that fear of being unworthy, not good enough.
And developing shame resilience is key to embracing vulnerability.
Exactly. It's about talking back to those negative voices in our heads.
The ones that tell us we're not worthy.
Yeah.
Brown talks about understanding our shame tapes.
Those negative messages we tell ourselves.
Often from childhood or societal expectations.
Right. It's about recognizing those messages and challenging them.
Like, are they actually true?
Exactly. Or are they just echoes of the past?
She also emphasizes speaking shame.
Yes. Breaking the silence and sharing our experiences with trusted people.
Because shame thrives in secrecy.
It does. When we keep it bottled up, it grows.
But when we share it with someone who cares,
Yeah.
it loses its power.
Brown tells this great story about a man at her book signing who called her a defense against the dark arts teacher.
I love that.
He was struggling so much with shame and vulnerability,
Wow.
and just connecting with someone who understood helped him feel less alone.
That's so powerful.
Connection is the antidote to shame.
So we've talked about defining vulnerability, debunking myths, understanding our defenses.
Yes.
But what does all this mean for us?
Right. How do we actually dare greatly in our lives? Well, Brown dives into specific areas like parenting and leadership.
Oh, that's perfect, because we're going to dive into those areas in the next part of this deep dive.
Sound good?
But for now, I want you to think about this. Where are you holding back in your life because of fear?
Yeah.
What would it look like to dare greatly in that area?
What if you leaned into the discomfort?
Ooh.
What if you allowed yourself to be seen, imperfections, and all
The possibilities are endless.
they are when we dare to be vulnerable?
So take a deep breath, summon your courage, and get ready to dare greatly.
We'll be back in a flash to explore how to put all of this into practice. Welcome back. You ready to keep diving deep into daring greatly?
You know what? Let's do it.
All right, so last time we left off talking about shame resilience.
Right, learning to cope with shame in a healthy way.
Exactly. And one thing that stood out to me was the connection Brown makes between shame resilience and giving and receiving feedback.
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting because feedback can be tough.
It can be on both ends, giving and receiving.
Totally. Like, it's so easy to get defensive. Or just shut down completely when we feel criticized.
Yeah, it often feels like a personal attack.
Even when it's meant to be helpful.
Exactly. But what Brown found is that people who are more shame resilient,
Yeah.
they can actually handle feedback better.
Mm.
without spiraling, you
Right.
know?
Without the self-doubt and blame.
Exactly.
Well,
They can separate their worth from the feedback.
which allows for growth and learning.
So it's not about pretending the feedback doesn't sting
No,
or ignoring it.
it's about being resilient.
Yeah,
Hearing it, processing it, and using it in a constructive way.
like building a muscle.
Exactly. It takes practice.
But how do we actually do that?
Well, Brown outlines a few key elements for giving and receiving feedback effectively.
Okay.
And one that really resonated with me is the idea of sitting on the same side of the table.
Sitting on the same side of the table, what does that mean?
It's about approaching feedback as a collaboration,
Okay.
working together towards a shared goal.
So you're teammates.
Exactly, not adversaries.
Yeah, I like that. And that shift in perspective can make a huge difference.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, imagine you're going into a performance review at work.
Okay.
If you see your boss as the enemy,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be defensive, less likely to actually hear what they have to say.
Right.
But if you can approach it as a collaborative effort to
Yeah.
improve your performance and help the team,
You're more likely to be open to the feedback.
exactly, you see it as an opportunity for growth.
Brown actually shares a story about a college professor who called her in to discuss her paper.
Oh, yeah.
She went in ready for a fight,
Oh, I bet.
assuming the professor was on the opposing side.
Ready to tear it apart.
But the professor sat down next to her,
Wow.
praised her work, and offered suggestions.
That's amazing.
And that's when Brown realized they were on the same team.
Such a powerful shift.
It is, and it applies to all relationships, not just professional ones.
Absolutely. Think about your interactions with family, friends, even your partner.
Right. Approaching those conversations from a place of collaboration.
Yeah, it can change the way you connect.
So sitting on the same side of the table is a good starting point.
It is.
But what about when we're the ones giving feedback?
That can be even more daunting.
It can.
Brown stresses being clear about our intentions when we give feedback.
Okay.
It's not about tearing someone down or proving we're right.
Right.
It's about helping them grow and
It's
learn.
about supporting them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she provides this helpful checklist
Yeah.
for giving feedback effectively.
Ooh, a checklist. I love checklists.
Right. One question that really stood out was, am I willing to own my part?
Own my part.
Yeah, taking responsibility for our role in the situation
Okay.
and being open to hearing the other person's perspective.
That takes humility.
It does, and self-awareness.
But it builds trust.
It does, and creates a more productive conversation.
Another thing Brown highlights is focusing on growth and potential.
Yeah, rather than dwelling on shortcomings.
So instead of what they did wrong,
Right. Focus on what they can do differently next time.
so it's about empowerment. All right, so we talked about giving feedback,
We have.
but receiving it can be just as hard.
Oh, it can be.
It's easy to get defensive, dismiss it.
Or let those negative thoughts take over.
Totally understandable. Our brains are wired to protect us.
They are. And feedback can feel like a threat.
Right.
But Brown challenges us to be open and receptive.
To really listen.
Yeah, and try to understand the feedback, even when it's tough.
And we don't have to do this alone.
We don't.
Having someone we trust to talk to
Someone to help us process it.
can make a huge difference.
It's like having a coach in your corner
Exactly.
to help you see the big picture and remind you of your strengths,
And remember, feedback is a gift.
even if it's wrapped in sandpaper.
I love that.
It's an opportunity to learn and grow.
To become a better version of ourselves.
This whole conversation about feedback might seem a little off topic,
Yeah.
but it actually connects back to Brown's main message.
Oh, so?
Well, she argues that we have to dare greatly in all areas of our lives.
Not just personal relationships.
Right, but also at work, in our communities, in the world.
And feedback is an essential part of that.
It is. It helps us see ourselves more clearly,
And identify areas where we can grow.
to become more courageous and authentic individuals.
Brown tells this great story about a talk she gave at the University of Houston.
Oh, yeah.
A student asked her how to balance vulnerability with the need to project confidence.
Especially in a competitive field like business.
It's a great question because we're often told to be strong and confident to succeed.
Right.
But Brown says that true confidence comes from embracing vulnerability.
I love that.
It's about being willing to say, I don't know.
Yeah, or I mess up.
Owning our mistakes and being open to learning.
It's about showing up authentically, even when it feels risky.
And that authenticity is powerful.
It is. And she uses the example of Lululemon CEO Christine Day.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about earlier.
Right.
She transformed the company culture by encouraging vulnerability and authenticity.
And it worked.
It did. Lululemon has seen incredible success under her leadership.
proving that vulnerability isn't just some feel-good concept.
No, it's a key driver of innovation and success.
And she wasn't afraid to let people fail.
No, her golden rule was, if you screw up, you clean it up.
I love that.
It's about accountability and learning.
Mistakes are opportunities for growth.
Exactly, not reasons for shame.
And it all starts with vulnerability,
And building trust.
where people feel safe to take risks and be themselves.
Exactly.
So vulnerability isn't about weakness at all.
Not at all.
It's about strength, showing up authentically, connecting with others.
And building a life based on courage and compassion.
That's what Daring Greatly is all about.
It is.
It's a guidebook for a more courageous and fulfilling life.
Starting with embracing our vulnerability.
And in the final part of this deep dive,
Yes.
we're going to explore specific ways to cultivate vulnerability and courage.
Focusing on parenting and leadership.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our Daring Greatly deep dive.
Are you ready to put all this into practice?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we've talked about defining vulnerability, debunking myths, understanding our defenses.
Right, and that whole idea of shame resilience.
Exactly. But now we're going to zoom out and look at how vulnerability plays out in two key areas.
Parenting and leadership.
You got it.
These are such important areas because they really impact our relationships.
Yeah, with our kids and the people we lead.
Exactly. And Brown's research shows that embracing vulnerability in these areas can create more connected and courageous families and workplaces.
Like a ripple effect.
Totally. So let's start with parenting.
Okay.
Brown says our parenting is shaped by our own experiences with vulnerability and shame.
Yeah, if we grew up in a family where vulnerability was seen as weak,
Uh-huh.
we're more likely to pass those beliefs on to our kids.
Even if we don't mean to.
Exactly. It's like those messages become ingrained in us.
And we end up parenting from a place of fear.
Instead of love and abundance,
But we can break the cycle.
Brown gives us some strategies for cultivating vulnerability and connection in our families.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One of the most important things is minding the gap.
Minding the gap. What's that?
It's about being aware of the difference between what we say and what we do.
Oh, I see.
Like if we tell our kids to be brave and take risks,
Yeah,
but then we shield ourselves from vulnerability,
you're going to notice that.
then what actions speak louder than words.
Right. Kids are always watching us.
They are, even when we don't realize it.
So we need to walk the walk.
Exactly. If we want our kids to embrace vulnerability, we have to model it,
Which means being our authentic selves.
even when it's scary.
It also means admitting when we're wrong.
Yes.
Apologizing.
Asking for help when we need it.
Those are all acts of vulnerability.
And it shows our kids that it's okay to not be perfect.
Exactly. That we're all human.
We learn from our mistakes.
Another key part of parenting with vulnerability is fostering a sense of enough.
Enough.
Yeah, letting go of that scarcity mindset.
The one that says we're not good enough.
Right. Or that our kids need to be perfect to be worthy of love. Oh, that scarcity mindset can be so toxic.
It makes us compare ourselves to other parents.
I feel like we're always falling short.
Right, and then we put that pressure on our kids.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Instead, Brown says we need to cultivate a mindset of abundance.
Abundance.
Yeah, believing that we are enough.
We have enough.
And our kids are perfect just the way they are.
That's such a powerful shift in thinking.
It is. It's about focusing on what we have.
Not what we lack.
Exactly. The love, the connection, the joy.
And when we parent from that place of enough, we create a sense of safety and belonging for our kids.
They feel seen, heard, and loved unconditionally.
Which allows them to truly thrive.
And remember, parenting is messy.
Oh, it is.
It's okay to not have all the answers.
We make mistakes.
To lose our cool sometimes.
We're all learning as we go.
Exactly. There's no such thing as the perfect parent.
And our imperfections can actually be teaching moments.
Yeah, when we admit our mistakes, apologize, make amends.
We show our kids how to be accountable.
And resilient.
Such important life skills.
Now let's talk about leadership.
Okay.
Brown argues that vulnerability is actually a key ingredient for good leadership.
Really?
It builds trust, fosters connection, drives innovation.
It challenges that old command and control style of leadership.
Right, which often just leads to fear and disengagement.
So Brown says true leadership is about empowering others.
Yeah, creating a safe space for risk-taking.
And being authentic.
She gives tons of examples of leaders who embraced vulnerability.
And got great results.
Like Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks.
Yeah.
He built a global empire by focusing on human connection.
And creating a culture of belonging.
Exactly. Or Jim Senegal, the co-founder of Costco.
He prioritizes his employees' well-being.
Yeah. He leads with compassion and fairness.
These leaders show that vulnerability isn't just a soft skill.
It's a strategic advantage.
It helps them build strong teams,
Foster creativity.
and inspire others.
And it's not just about leaders embracing vulnerability.
Right.
It's about creating a culture where everyone feels safe to be vulnerable.
So normalizing vulnerability in the workplace.
Yeah, creating a space where people feel comfortable asking for help,
Admitting mistakes.
sharing their ideas.
Without fear of judgment.
Exactly. It requires a shift from perfectionism and blame.
To learning and growth.
Recognizing that we're all human, we make mistakes.
And our imperfections make us unique.
And valuable.
One way to create this culture is through storytelling.
Oh, yeah. Brown says sharing our stories of struggle and vulnerability can help us connect with others, build empathy.
Break down those barriers that separate us.
Exactly. And you don't have to be a CEO to do this.
Right.
We can all be leaders in our own lives.
Modeling vulnerability.
Encouraging others to do the same.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into daring greatly, the key takeaway is that vulnerability is not a weakness.
It's the key to a wholehearted life.
It's about showing up, being authentic, letting yourself be seen.
Imperfections and all.
It takes courage practice and challenging those messages that tell us to hide.
But the rewards are amazing.
Deeper connections, greater joy, a more meaningful life.
So we hope this deep dive has inspired you to embrace vulnerability.
And dare greatly in your own life.
Remember, you don't have to do it all at once.
Start small. Take one step outside your comfort zone.
And be kind to yourself.
Vulnerability is a journey.
That's a destination.
And we're all worthy of love and belonging just as we are.